Welcome to my new video podcast, which I think is probably going to be a good format for me just because I like to talk and I don't have to edit it so much. I will edit it a little bit. I'm Kara Buntin, in case you're new here, and I'm a longtime Etsy seller, but I've owned a home-based business for 10 years before I even started selling on Etsy, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I'll explain this in a minute. But I wanted to explain this podcast first because YouTube has just let us do podcasts. And basically, it's just a playlist on my channel. So you can find this by going to the podcast playlist on my YouTube channel. But I think eventually they're going to put all the podcasts on YouTube Music, which is a separate app. You should be able to find it there. If you can't, I don't know. But I mean, you should be able just to listen to this while you're working or something. That's how I use YouTube. I just turn videos on and listen. So the format's going to be a little bit different. I'm just going to be talking, and I will have guests on, I hope, at some point. But for now, I'm just going to be talking. And I thought that the first thing I should do, let's talk about this book. I wrote this book for home-based businesses who did cakes at home. All right. Now, like I said, I had a home-based business for years, like 12 years before I started selling on Etsy. I had a home-based business, and I was making custom wedding cakes. Weddings are a very fun, and I say that in a very sarcastic way, a very fun category to sell in because you're dealing with people who are at a time of extremely heightened emotions. And heightened emotions means that they are extra emotional and they're extra irrational. And you have to be the kind of the calmer. You have to be in control of your business and yourself and the customer a lot of the times. Because if you're not, they're not, and it doesn't make anybody happy. So what happened with me, I had been making since like right before 2000. We moved to Virginia and I opened this home-based business that was making the custom wedding cakes, like I said. And after about 5 or 6 years, I mean, I was profitable from the first year, but I'm always very careful like that. But I saw a lot of people in cake forums, and yes, they do exist. There's a lot of cake forums out there. I saw a lot of people with kind of the similar problems over and over. And it wasn't about baking. Well, some of it was. A lot of it was mostly about how to run a business profitably and to kind of control your business. So what I started doing is I started giving advice on cake forums. And you guys, if you're familiar with me, you know that I like to give advice. I really feel like people should have the option. And this is like my sincere belief is that I want people who are creative to be able to make money with their creativity and to run a business the way that they see fit. When I first started having a home-based business, there was a lot of advice out there that was really not tailored to home-based business. And I will go so far as to say women running a home-based business who had small children. That's a whole different ballgame, all right? But in general, a lot of the advice about starting a business or, just running a business or scaling a business, it was all based on people who wanted to have a storefront and who wanted to grow the business and then sell it or either develop franchises or whatever. And that just wasn't anywhere near what I wanted to do. And it wasn't anywhere near what any of the people that I was talking to online wanted to do either, because most of them were women who were at home for whatever reason, or they were just doing this as a part-time job or whatever. But none of them wanted to build a storefront, like just have a huge business that they could sell. They just wanted to make money doing what they enjoyed doing and what they were good at. So I started talking to people about that. And I come from a family of creatives, and I've seen firsthand how hard it is to use your creativity to build a business and to make money and to sustain a workable living. So I really, 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 that's kind of my mission, is to help people do that if you want to do that. But the problem that I see a lot of people get into is that if you are a creative person, you don't come at building a business with the mindset of building a business. You just think, oh, I would like to sell what I make. And it doesn't help when you have people telling you, oh, you really should sell this. I've seen commercials on YouTube. I think it's on YouTube. There's a commercial that comes up for me a lot where some girl is making a hat or something, and it has people coming in and saying, you have to start a business. You really should sell this. And I'm like, look, that's the worst reason to start a business if people tell you you should sell it, because those people are not going to be your customers. It's a very, we'll get into that in this. But I decided that, I had been talking to people online and giving them advice about their cake business and how to be more profitable and that kind of thing. And I said, I'm just going to write all this and put it down in a book. Now, I looked up in the copyright on this book, and this is still available on Amazon, and it should be free. If it is not free on Amazon, it's called Not So Common Sense by Kara Buntin. And if it's not free on Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble, and I think you can download it there. I'm not sure if it's just for their e-reader, but it is on Amazon. You just have to go and search my name on Amazon, and all the books that I have on there will come up. And this is basically, it's 5 tips for home-based business success. This was not meant to be an Etsy book. This was not meant to be a book for someone who was selling products online. This is just for someone who has a home-based business, and it really was tailored to cake decorators. But there are principles that cross over every type of home-based business. And, the first one is, and I don't think that I went after that in this book, but the first one is just to decide what you want and why are you running a home-based business? Do you want to just have a business that you're making part-time money from? That's fine. Do you want to build it into something full-time? That's also fine. But first of all, don't feel like you have to fit into someone else's mold. And I know that there are business books out there that are like, you need to scale up. I have no desire to scale up. I have no desire to have employees. I have no desire to be big and to have something that I can give to my children. My kids want nothing to do with my business. So, but you don't have to fit into someone else's mold is basically what I'm saying. But, what I want to do for these first few podcast episodes, because I kind of like talking, I think this is going to be a good format for me. And I had been reluctant to start a podcast because of the tech. But now that YouTube is giving us this option, you can just put this on while you're working. And like I said, that's what I do with podcasts. So I just turn on a long video and listen. But I want to go through here and just talk about this stuff because none of this is out of date. And I wrote this in 2010. So that was a year before I even registered on Etsy. I started selling on Etsy, or I started my account on Etsy in 2011. I don't think I started selling on Etsy for another couple of years. And the first Etsy shop that I had nothing to do with cakes. I was selling some hats that I had made because my daughter had surgery and I was sitting in the hospital with nothing to do. So I started knitting hats. And I said, what am I going to do with these? And so I said, I'll just start an Etsy shop and sell them. See, it's another bad reason to start a business. But I actually did sell one and I was kind of shocked. So then I started thinking, all right, well, with the cakes, what can I sell online? Because that would be an additional way to find a bigger audience. And so I started selling some tutorials and that kind of stuff. But at that point, it was still related to the wedding cakes. And I still had my wedding cake business. And, we can talk about that another day. But anyway, this book is copyright 2010. It predates Etsy for me. But the advice in it is basically timeless, right? But I'm going to go through it and we're going to talk about this. So the first chapter in this, and this basically is just, it's 5 tips for being successful at a home-based business, things that you need to keep in mind. But these were things that people did not seem to understand, which to me were very obvious. But anyway, so I guess that, that's the inspiration for the book. I was just like, why is this not obvious to people? All right. So the first thing is it's not a hobby anymore. All right. Now, like I said, people will tell you, you need to start a business. You need to sell these online. That is the worst reason to start a business. All right. Because yes, everybody has, well, not everybody, I won't say that. A lot of people have things that they're good at making or they're creative about. That doesn't mean, and this just pains me, it doesn't mean that you are the kind of person who should have a home-based business. It just means that you like to make that thing. All right. And if you want a home-based business, that's great. But if you don't, that's great too. And you have to remember that the people who are telling you you should sell that, they are not going to be the ones who are buying from you because they're the ones you're probably giving the stuff to for free. And people who get stuff for free are going to expect to continue to get stuff for free, and they're not going to pay for it. Now, you will have some friends who will pay you. Those are probably your best friends, and they want to support you, but they're not going to be like your consistent customers for the rest of your life. They might buy 1 or 2 things, and that's really nice. You should never expect friends and family to be your customers. That's I think that might even be a separate chapter. That might be like the kind of thing, let me see. That might be the kind of thing that is so important that It is, yeah, it's chapter 2. So I'm not going to get into that now. I'll talk about that in a minute, but in another episode. But the first thing to remember is that if you start a home-based business, it is not a hobby anymore. And you have to think of it like a business if you want it to be a business. Now, if you're just dabbling, if you're saying, I think I'll test this out, I'll see how it goes. All right, well, test it out and see how it goes. But while you're doing that, you need to treat it like a business too, because you can say, I'll test it out and see how it goes, and then list a bunch of stuff, and it's never going to sell because you're just testing it out and you're waiting for it to do the work. And businesses don't work on their own. You have to put the work into it. So to really test it out and see how it goes, you're going to have to commit to actually doing the work for a specific amount of time before you can see the results. And if you put a lot of work into it and there are no results, then that's your answer right there. If you put a lot of work into it and you start seeing sales and you're getting some success with it, then that's your answer. And you need to make your decisions based on your results after you put in the genuine work, but not while you're just waiting to see how it goes, because nothing works if you're sitting there waiting. It doesn't. All right. So let me go through here and see what I said in this book. All right. Now, when I wrote this book, I made up a woman, this poor victim. She is making every mistake in the book, and literally, but I mean, it's basically just, she's someone who has enjoyed doing her hobby. And let me see. I think she was making gift baskets. Okay. Because at the time I'm thinking, okay, gift baskets, that's something. All right. Now, if you're selling on Etsy, you're not allowed to do gift baskets unless you're making everything in them. I just want to put that caveat out there, because if we're talking about gift baskets and Etsy, and she could be selling these on her own website, that's fine. But this was not necessarily just for online business. It was for someone who wants to start a home-based business. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, a lot of people start a home-based business thinking it's going to be so much fun. I will be able to do everything I want. I'll be able to do things when I want. It's going to be so much fun. Well, just no. When you start doing something for a job, like for income, you suddenly don't like it as much. And I think I mentioned this. I probably mentioned this in here. I was a psychology major, so I know all these kind of studies off the top of my head for this kind of stuff. But when there have been studies where they show that when you start paying people to do things, they don't like it as much anymore, because now it's work. They're not getting an intrinsic reward. It's extrinsic, which means a reward that comes from outside of yourself, or an intrinsic reward, which is kind of satisfaction that you give. Like it's a reward that you give yourself. Like, oh, I did a good job. I feel good about that. That's the kind of thing that will make you want to do more of it. An extrinsic reward is when something comes from outside and they're like, we're going to pay you to do this. So you are getting rewarded for doing the work by getting a paycheck. But because it's an extrinsic reward, people don't value that as much, and it becomes work. And I remember there was one study where they paid college students, it's always college students, right? They paid college students to do crossword puzzles. And the people who were paid to do the puzzles, I'm not sure what the situation was, or they're timed or whatever, but the people who were paid to do the puzzles did not want to do more. But the people who could just sit and do the puzzles all day had a good time, and they're like, yeah, I'll do this all day if you're going to let me sit here. And I think they must have paid them to do the study. But, if you're a college student and someone is saying, hey, we're going to give you this reward, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's fine. But they didn't enjoy it as much. So you have to look up the details of that one. But basically, if you get paid to do something, it's work, and people just don't like it as much. So just remember that it's not going to be fun. And I actually used to go to buy my cake ingredients every week at Walmart, okay? Because actually Walmart was cheaper than the food supplier here, just based on the quantities that I would have had to buy. So I went to Walmart every week. I got to know all the cashiers. They knew what I did, so blah, blah, blah. But every now and then there'd be a new cashier who I didn't know. The first thing they see like 6 dozen eggs, 20 pounds of flour, 30 pounds of sugar, whatever. I bought a lot every week. It's all coming down the belt. And the cashier would say, oh, what are you baking? All right. So I would say, I make wedding cakes. And the immediate comment was, that's so much fun. And at that point, I usually just wanted to smack the person. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's work. It's hard work. And the truth is that before I started doing it as a business, I probably enjoyed it a lot more. And for people who don't do it, that probably does sound fun. But the truth is that when you start doing something as a job, it becomes less fun. It's not fun all day. And you just have to understand that you have to look at it as a job. And do you want to do that? So do you want to run a business, or do you want to have a hobby? Because you really are not going to want to keep doing the thing that you're doing for money when you're done doing it. And, it's the old story about the carpenter comes home and his house is falling apart because he doesn't want to fix it because he's been fixing houses all day. It's the same thing. All right. The next point to remember when you're talking about, running a business, and it's a business, is that you have to be your own boss. Now, are you capable of doing that? Because if you're not capable of setting your own limits and setting your own schedule and actually following through on that schedule, this might not be a good idea for you to have a home-based business. Because if you are the boss, you have to make yourself work, and you have to be mean to yourself and force yourself to do things you don't want to do. Yes, there will be a point at which you can probably hire out and hire people to do some of the things that you don't like to do. And there are enough software tools now that you can do schedulers for your social media. You just have to sit down and do it all at once to schedule everything out. So there are ways around that, but there are always going to be things that you don't want to do, and you're still going to have to do them. And if you're the boss, you have to make yourself do it, and that's just how it is. So the boss can be a real taskmaster when you work at home because it's you, and you're responsible for everything. And that's just that's how it is. So just be aware of that. If you are very bad at procrastinating and you know that you're not going to do the things that you need to do on the schedule that you need to do them, this might not be the right thing. This might not be the right fit for you. And, there are ways around it. If you just want to do this part-time, that's fine. You could just make things and list things that are ready to sell so that you don't have to do things on a schedule. You don't have deadlines and that kind of thing. But it's really the deadline. For me, it's the deadlines that kill me. I don't enjoy deadlines. So what I try to do is just list things that I can make quickly. It's not going to be, stretched out across time where I know that I have to get something finished by a certain time. And like if things do take longer, I'll make them and have them in stock so that I could send them right away. And then I don't feel like I have to make this now. I don't like that feeling. It's like when somebody orders something that I have to make now, I don't like that. So you need to you just know yourself, understand yourself. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't like working on deadlines, then try to figure out a way around it, or just have a job where you don't have to work on deadlines, because this is not one of those jobs. If you work a home-based business, there's going to be deadlines and you have to do it. There's no way around it. All right. Now, going from that, I'm reading along here. Don't let your work run your life. And I'm really bad at this because I just love working. I like being productive. I'm the kind of person that likes being productive. I like making things. I like making items. So when I'm sitting watching TV, I'm doing something. I'm doing something online. I do keyword lists now for SEO. I like doing that. I like doing SEO. I like writing blog posts. I don't like making cake stuff so much anymore, but I've been doing that for 20 years, But there are things that I like doing, and a lot of it tends to be work related. So for me, it looks like I'm working a lot, but I don't feel like I am if I'm not making the products. If I'm making the products that I sell on Etsy and my website, that's work for me. Everything else I can do when I want. Like, for example, I just decided to do this podcast this morning. I had no plans for it. It's not something that's on the schedule, but I finished the products I had to make, and I'm just doing this now. So, you have to, you just have to understand yourself. Okay. And, if you're the kind of person that wants a lot of free time, figure out if having a home-based business is going to give you that. I don't care. I'm just the kind of person. I grew up in a military family, so we moved a lot. I've traveled a lot in my life. I don't want to go on vacations like that. I just don't. But if you're the kind of person that likes to go on long vacations if you're the kind of person that likes to take a lot of time off, a full-time home-based business might not be right for you, because this takes a lot more work than working for someone else. And, people say, oh, having a home-based business is going to give me so much flexibility. On one hand, it does. On the other hand, it really does not, because you really do have to put a lot more time into it. And even when you're not working on the business, you're thinking about it, and it's hard to separate. There's all kinds of complicating factors with working from home. And I think probably a lot of people figured that out in the last few years, and they were very eager to go back to the office. Because when you have an office job or a job where you work for someone else, you can go there and then you can come home and you're not the boss. You're done. You're done for the day. I'm never done for the day. And if you have a home-based business, you are never going to be done for the day. However, you do have to fit your business into your life, and don't let it be your life. Unless that's, for me, I think of my business as the products. Everything else is fun for me. So I don't feel like my business runs my life. My kids look at me and say, you work all the time. And I'm like, well, I kind of, but not really, because I can just quit doing any of this. I can quit doing this stuff. Like yesterday, I just sat and watched TV all day, and that was fine. I had finished my orders and I just did that. So that's fine. And you have to find your balance. So what works for one person, what works for me is not going to work for you. All right. You might find all of this kind of stuff that I do just horrible work and it's terrible. I think it's fun. So find your fun. Make sure that you have fun in your life. Everyone has to have fun. And if you have your business at your home and you don't have any time for fun, however that looks, then there's something wrong. So you need to just be able to fit your business into your life and not fit your life into your business. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. Just, you have to be able to balance it out and put limits. Be able to set limits for yourself. I think that kind of sums that up. And yeah, I think I see the word balance in here. And the last section on this is called, how much am I worth? This is a question that plagues every small business owner, whether you're a home-based business or not, but especially home-based businesses, because a lot of times with a brick and mortar, if you're renting someplace, you have the rent, you have utilities, you have some very fixed expenses that that you have to cover, and you can kind of set your pricing that way. But if you're working from home, your rent doesn't go up, your mortgage doesn't cost more, your utilities probably don't cost that much more. Right? And it's really just your services. And people don't think of that. People don't think of what you're doing as a service, but it really is. So if you're making something, they're not just paying for the product. When customers come to you, they're not just paying for the product. They're paying for the product and your skill and time that it takes to make it. So you need to make sure that when you're setting your pricing, and this is like, I have a pricing guide that I put together for cake decorators, and I have a version of it on my Teachable site for Etsy sellers, because this is so important. If you want to build a business that is sustainable and is going to make you money down the road, you have to have your pricing right, or it's not going to work, because you're going to be working, like I said, for $3 an hour. And nobody can live on that. And you have to know how much you're worth. And I will tell you, I might tell this story again at some point, because it really illustrated it for me. I once made a cake for a local electrical union. And it was like the 50th anniversary of their building or their union or something. I don't know. It was like some big event. So they were throwing this big event over the holidays. And it was going to be a huge thing for everybody. And they wanted a cake literally in the shape of the building itself, with like realistic proportions and trees and the pavement and is it brick over here and wood over here? We want that. We want it to look like the building. Okay, that's a lot of work. And I went to a meeting with a bunch of them, and they were telling me, what do we want? How many servings? It was a lot of servings, so it was going to be a big cake. And it ended up being on a board that was like 4x6. And I couldn't even put it together in my house. I had to put it together at the last minute outside in the garage, where I could like do all the landscaping and stuff around it and then do the cake at the last minute and put it all together at the last minute because it was so big. And, I'm sitting in this meeting talking to all these electricians who are union electricians, right? So they're union. They charge more. And I said, this cake is going to be, and I don't remember when this was. It would probably be more than this, but I said it was probably going to be around $1,800 for this cake. Because I'm thinking, like the time that it's going to take to put into it, I'm going to have to walk around the building and do measurements. I'm going to have to do all kinds of scales and stuff like that and make all the trees. I said, and it was a lot of servings. And I said, it's going to be around $1,800. I'm just pulling that number out of the air. But they are all like, whoa, I'm in the wrong business. Ha, ha, ha. And I said to them, as union plumbers, or as electricians, as union electricians, I'm sure that you understand and can appreciate the fact that you're not just paying for the cake, you're paying for the skill. And every single one of them was like, I get it. Okay. So they're not just paying, when a customer buys from you, they're not just paying for the product, they're paying for your skill that you have gained over time to make the product. And I see this question, and I always saw this question a lot from cake decorators. Should I charge more if it's the first time I've done the design? And then since it's not going to take me as long the second time, should I charge less? No, because they're paying for your skill, and your skill has nothing to do with how long it takes you. Okay. If you take 5 hours to make one decoration for a cake because it's the first time that you've done it and you have trial and error, they're still paying you a fixed amount. They're not paying you by the hour. As soon as your skill gets better, it takes you a shorter time, and they're still paying you that amount. So you're basically earning a higher dollar amount per hour because your skill is better. So don't look at pricing as just the cost of the materials. You have to include your skill and your time. And that's something that a lot of people have a real hard time with. But honestly, that's the main part of pricing anything, is to figure out how much am I worth? How much is my skill worth? How much is my time worth? Because honestly, if they had said, well, we could pay you $500 for that cake, it's not going to take me less time. That just means that I would be making this big cake thinking, oh, I'm making $500. That might not even cover my expenses. So the thing to remember is that when you're pricing things, would you rather take a nap during that time? If you're only going to be earning $2 an hour, I'd rather take a nap. All right. So basically just keep in mind that pricing should not just include the cost of materials. It should also include the cost of your time and your skill. And that's something that people really have a hard time with, but that's the main part of making money online with a home-based business. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up, and I will talk to you later, but watch for more podcast episodes because I kind of like this format, and there's not as much editing to do either. So I will talk to you guys later.